have a question for you. How confident do you feel around sales? I talk to so many people who this is a huge fear of theirs, specifically those who identify as introverts. Now, I feel you because, believe it or not, I am actually way more of an introvert, and sales used to freak me out. But you can't get your message out, you can't have a successful business or grow your passion project if you aren't able to confidently sell your ideas, your products, and your services. So when I was talking with my girlfriend, Ashley Pardo, about her new program, which is designed specifically for introverts who want to launch businesses, I knew that I had to have her on the podcast. Ashley is a functional nutrition therapy practitioner and also a business coach. Her journey began when she left her job in human resources to get her master's in food studies and start to pursue her passions. She created and ran her own business as a private chef and a nutrition educator for over 7 years. And she now teaches others how to cook in her online cooking school called Quick Fire Kitchen. And she also coaches women one-on-one on how to build a positive relationship with food and also how to build a successful wellness business that they love. Welcome back. We have another super fun episode today. I had the chance to spend a couple of days with this beauty a few weeks ago at our mutual friends mastermind retreat, and it was just so great catching up. So Ashley, thanks for being here.
I'm so excited, and it was so good to see you too a couple weeks ago, Lindsay.
Yeah, well, we should share the way that we met. I talk all the
Yes.
time about how I invested in myself over the last year, and I joined a mastermind, and that
Yes.
was where we connected. And that's one of the reasons I loved that experience so much was the relationships that it brought into my life with people who I might not have met otherwise.
I love it. And I remember meeting you, and we sat next to each other actually. And I think that in even like the first moments that we met, you just started being vulnerable with me instantly. And I was like, oh, wow, like I know I'm going to like what she's about because she's already like just being real. And obviously, that's a huge part of just what you do. So grateful to have
Yeah.
met you there.
Yeah, it's very cool to, even after we're both complete with that experience, we're not actually in the mastermind anymore, to see that the relationships that I truly, that was the biggest value I got out of the experience, but that those are
Yes.
continuing on. And that's like just been the biggest blessing.
For sure. And they'll continue like forever. You know what I mean? Which I
Yeah.
love.
So we were chatting a little bit at this retreat a few weeks ago, and you mentioned this new program that you're developing. And as soon as you said it, I was like, well, we need to do a podcast episode on this. And we're going to get to this actual content in a little bit, but you were talking about how you really saw this need to create a program around developing confidence for people who might feel more introverted and therefore struggle to really put themselves out there or sell their products and services. So I'd love if you would actually just start with your business journey and what has led you up to the point of seeing this need in the marketplace and deciding to develop this program. I would love to hear.
So this was actually my own story. And I feel like with whatever, business is all about solving problems, like your clients and people that are going to pay you have a problem, and then you have like a proprietary solution that you're going to give them. And I have always been sort of a quiet, reserved person. And honestly, I felt like I had to be different in order to have a business. I thought that I had to be like on Instagram dancing and singing and being loud and boisterous. There's nothing wrong with that if that's like authentic to you. But as an introvert, as a super highly sensitive person, I really had so many limiting beliefs around how I was and how it would translate to business, especially online business, where you don't get that in-person, factor of connection with people. So I started out as a private chef. I worked in the corporate world in human resources for years. I went back to cooking school. I worked on farms for a while, had my own struggles with food. and turned that into cooking for people in my hometown of Miami, where I did that for 7 years. And behind the scenes, I also, as I said, I struggled with food for a long time. So I also forced myself, it wasn't easy for me to do this, but I also forced myself to get out in my community, make in-person connections, give presentations about relationship with food, cooking, just get myself in front of people. And I noticed that people really connected with me. Literally the people that I connected with 7, 8 years ago are still clients or are still just following my journey. So I saw that there was something there that, I had those limiting beliefs, but then I saw myself creating business in this other way. And it wasn't until I started, I transitioned from being a private chef to then being a full-time nutrition coach, a business coach, and I have an online cooking school too. But it wasn't until I started putting myself out online and coaching others around business and seeing that they had the same struggles that I had, that quietude, that sort of like a little bit of shame of not being like loud people, which are thought of as like the most successful, I think. I saw that, I think it's the time that we're living in right now. I always think like, what a time to be alive, like to create a business for yourself, to be an entrepreneur, to really live a life of freedom. Like that's really, really important to me and if you're a person out there who's listening and you're like, I have gifts, I have something that can help people solve their own problems and I can be of service to other people. It's such a shame to think like to quit before you even start. So I really developed a framework for people to get out there as an introvert. It does take a little bit of going out of your comfort zone consistently and stretching yourself. But the most important thing is that I truly believe that no matter how you are, if you are authentic, that you can connect with somebody out there, because you being the way that you are and being upfront about it is going to allow other people to, give permission to other people to just be themselves and really base the foundation of your business on authentic connection. And it sort of blew my mind. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I need to create something for all of the women out there who struggle with speaking and speaking their ideas and showing up on an Instagram live, whatever it is, a place where it could be safe. And then also that they could have the skills. Because I realized that sales isn't a personality, which is what we think. It's a skill and a value system.
Right. This is so much bigger than those of you listening who say, yeah, I absolutely have more introverted tendencies. I want all of you listening, whether you resonate with that term or not, to think, what are the labels that you're putting on yourself that really just start to define what you say you're capable of, what you say is possible for you. And I think that's what I heard so clearly when you shared this vision. And I can really relate to what you're saying too about what a time to be alive, because we have this tool called social media to be able to share ourselves and our message and our gifts for free and reach people across the world. Although I think on the flip side, really the catch-22 is there's all of this information coming at us and so many more opportunities to compare ourselves to other people who have different gifts than we have and start to really make up these stories about what is or isn't possible for us. And I had to come to that realization as well that you were saying, is that I'm wired a certain way for a reason. I have the gifts and the personalities that I have. The personalities. Do you like how I said there was like more than one?
Yes, there's multiple.
I have multiple personalities for a reason. You guys. It's so beautiful. So I actually would love to know, how do you define introvert as you use it? Or if you want to answer it this way, what are the qualities or the characteristics of the women that you find are really resonating with this message that you're sharing?
The number one, so if we just define introvert versus extrovert, I think I'm actually a mix of them if we really get down into like how they're defined, because introvert and extrovert is really how you recharge. So it's introverts recharge alone and extroverts get more energy from being around other people. But I think people think of introvert as somebody who just like never talks, has no thoughts, has nothing.
Has 10 cats.
Has 10 cats, is like they stay home all the time and have nothing to say. And, that it really isn't completely me. And I think for the women that I'm speaking to women who have a rich internal world and a lot to share, and they're more observant than they are, outwardly spoken, in a
Yeah.
sense, where they sort of scan rooms and observe and take their time and they're quiet, but at the same time, they're ambitious and they're sensitive. So that's something that I definitely label myself with, as a super sensitive person, just somebody who can feel other people's energies, which can also be a gift, because I think you can be a little more artistic if you're sensitive or creative. And at the same time, I think that you can also have the gift of connecting with other people. But because of that, we feel those natural fears. So the women that I'm speaking to are the ones that maybe absorb more than they give out, from the way that it looks on the outside. And they also feel like because they have that creativity, they feel like they have this gift inside. And sometimes they can feel trapped, and because they're highly ambitious and they don't know how to get it out. But I think that the number one thing is like the observant person who picks up information with that big internal world and just doesn't show it as much. Like, just because you're quiet doesn't mean that you don't have a voice,
Yeah.
which was my story too. Like, oh, I used to think everybody thought when they met me that I had nothing to say, or that just because I didn't put it out there as much but it's because I was observing, and sort of like takes time for me to process stuff. So all of those
Yeah.
things are the things that I see in the women, and that desire to get it out there.
Yes. I got so excited. I like literally choked on my own
Yeah.
saliva right there. What I wanted to say though is you are literally describing the version of me that people would have met had they met me 7 or 8 years ago. And it was
Yeah.
that inner turmoil between feeling like I had this message to get out there, but then also feeling the weight of how sensitive I could be to my outside world. I now see that as such a gift, but I had to learn that although I am very social and I do like to be out and with people, I have to recharge by myself, because it's actually, I take on the energy of everyone around me, and that can feel overwhelming until I learned how to process it and how to give myself the space that I needed. And that gave me so much freedom that I didn't have to be like the other people who maybe do get energy from being around others, that there were just as many gifts within how I was wired if I could learn to work within those gifts.
Yes. And really just capitalize on what you have inside of you. And I
Mhm.
think and maybe you relate to this too, and the women I work with spend a lot of energy trying to be someone else.
Oh my goodness.
Like all of
Yes.
the drains, I'm very woo. So like I visualize that as like literal leaks on the body of energy that you spend, just like, even at just the thoughts of like, oh, if I wasn't so quiet, if I knew how to express myself a little more, God, if only I could be like her. And like, what a time to be alive. But like you were saying, there's a minefield of you looking at all of these people out there who are quote unquote crushing it, who maybe have a personality that isn't like you. And then you're just quitting. That's what I see, is like women quit before they start because they're like, can't be like, I'm not like that. So I'm
Yep.
going to either force myself to be like that, which I can feel like when people aren't authentic. I think we can
Yeah.
always feel that when people are trying to be a
Mhm.
certain way that they're not. But that factor of like, oh my God, I'm not like her, therefore I can't be me,
Yep.
and that's just a story and a thought process, which when I
Oh,
realized that too, I was like, oh wow. Like I've been literally telling myself something, that's the opposite of what is true.
this is so good. And, when we talk in Powerhouse Women about helping women get out of their own way, I think this conversation is quite possibly one of the most important conversations we've had on the podcast, because and it could just be because it's my reality too, I see so many examples of this and so many women who ultimately start to question if they're meant to do the thing they feel called to do because they see that the way they would do it is different. So,
Mm.
will you talk a little bit about how those of us who know we tend to be super sensitive to
Mhm.
people's emotions, other outside influences, the characteristics we just described? what are some of like the tangible things that we can do to create that buffer, create those boundaries, and work within the skill set that we really have? Like, what are some of the tangible things that you teach women how to do within your curriculum?
In terms of business?
Yeah, I think most of the women listening today either have a business that they already have or would like to have, or a passion project, something that they feel in their heart they're meant to create, and it could be everything that we're saying today that is stopping them from taking that first or next step.
Yes. So the number one thing, I have two big things that I would say. And the number one thing that I would say is learn how to manage your energy and be very honest with yourself about that, because, I think we've all been burnt out to, probably everybody who's listening has had that to a certain extent, or where you just feel tired. So something that really helps me, like really practical, is, batching my tasks. So making sure that I'm only doing tasks that relate to each other on certain days. So when I first started being an online coach, I was like, didn't have many clients. So I would be like, I'll talk to you whenever you want. Like whenever works for you, I'll talk to you, which I found myself taking calls then like Monday morning, Friday evening, just all over the place. And now that it's been a couple years, I batch all of that so that I'm like in the energy of calls. And
Yes.
then I'm in the energy of writing like on Monday. I only take calls on Wednesday, Thursday, typically, like when I'm talking to clients. And then on Mondays and Tuesdays, I'm just like in my creative space because I'm not task switching. And that's, a big energy leak. So I think batching your tasks, batching your days can be really, really good. And then another thing that can be really beneficial to women out there listening is really owning your expertise. Because
Mhm.
when we have a business that we want to do, obviously we are teaching people something, we are solving people's problems. And I think that so much of the fear that comes with public speaking, or even just getting up on an Instagram live, is being like, oh my God, what am I going to say? What's going to happen when the camera's on me, or I have the microphone, or I am even just in front of one person talking? Like I understand that anxiety because I used to be there too years ago.
Mhm.
So I think the first thing is figure out what it is that you're an expert in. What is it that you have knowledge in? What do you know how to talk about? What is it that you have that expertise in? For me, I really got my start with cooking, which is something that everybody can relate to because we all cook, we all eat. So I know, I spent 7 years as a private chef, so I know a lot about cooking. So I think that whatever it is that you are an expert in, whatever it is that you can solve people's problems with, own it and make sure that you know a lot about
Yeah.
it in different levels, and in depth, like really deep. And if you talk from that place of knowing, then it's much easier to talk about that than to talk about things that you don't really know a lot about.
Yeah.
So I think owning
Oh,
your expertise and making sure that you have a clear problem you're solving and you're getting people a specific result because of it.
and I love that because I think you are so right. There are things for each of us that we are very skilled in, or even to the point of being an expert in. And oftentimes we're looking at the next place we would like to go with our business or our expertise, and we're seeing that lack versus finding the confidence from standing in the things that we are really skilled at. Even if
Yeah.
it's things, and I think it's sometimes things that are so easy to overlook or downplay, even
Mhm.
things as simple as, I'm really great at making people feel comfortable the moment I meet them. I mean,
Yes.
that's an expertise, that's a skill set that can be so valuable in business. And I know for myself, I would overlook that, or overlook the fact that I genuinely love to connect other people. I love to be that
Yes.
connector.
Yes. And I think that so much of this is about trust,
Mhm.
making sure that you are somebody that other people trust. And I think that when we're first starting, I'm somebody who has lots of ideas, wants to do a bunch of stuff. But I think that especially if people are listening and they're trying to do something online, if they're selling online, I think that we have to start with something that's very simple and very clear before we go into other stuff. So
Right.
I don't think I could have started with, business for introverts or mindset, which is sort of intangible.
Right.
Can't I love mindset work, but like talking about mindset work to somebody who doesn't know that they need it is very hard. And there's not a lot of like tangible results that people can get. So
Right.
there's something called, I learned this actually from Rory and AJ Vaden, who have a company called Brand Builders, and they talk about something called Sheehan's Wall, where there's sort of a wall here, and you have to break through that wall before you start talking about the intangible things. And you break through that wall of trust by starting with something that's very clear, very tangible. For me, like I said, it was cooking.
Yeah.
So I would teach about cooking, get people these little small wins, sort of like have them think of me during the day as they're cooking, like, oh, she taught me that, and now I'm going to go do it. And now it's impacting me positively. So
Yes.
whatever it is for you, make sure that what you're starting with is tangible and awesome. That way you can go and like, once you have people's trust, you can really talk about whatever you want. So now that I've gotten people's trust, I'm like, okay, now there's all these other subjects that I want to talk about, mindset, business for introverts, and so forth. And now it's a lot easier for people to be open to it because they're just like following my journey since they trust me, because people buy coaches, not coaching. And we can talk about story later, because story is a big part of this too.
I'm just like hanging on every word. This is so vital for everyone to hear, because I was literally just at a mastermind day yesterday with a group of women, and that was a very common theme about, I don't know where to start. Here's where I eventually want to get to, and just honing in and simplifying down to one thing that you can master and become known for. It's just so brilliant and almost so simple that we could go to work to complicate it.
Yes. And we think it needs to be complicated. That's the
Yes.
thing. Like we don't think it can be as simple as it is. But I think owning both who you are and owning the expertise around the thing that your business is around, that tangible thing, once you break through, you get, even if it's just 10 people, those people are going to be your raving fans. And what's great is that, my business is not a business that has hundreds of thousands of followers. Like there's businesses out there that have, literally millions of people that follow and are customers.
Yeah.
Like I have about 1,000 people on my email list, which is not too much compared to a lot of other people, but I build deep connections with all those people. So you don't even need to have like, don't get bogged down by the numbers on your social and on your email list. Like just focus on one person at a time, impacting just like 5 people, 10 people,
Right.
20 people. And you really only need like 100 people, that are your raving fans
Right.
that are going to then follow your journey, which makes it a lot more digestible, I think. Because like when you see these big people with big followings, it's like, oh, I'll never get there.
Yes. And that may not be your path, and that is okay.
And it is okay. But it's easy
Yes.
to compare, especially like on Instagram and on Facebook and stuff.
So true. So true. Okay, I want to circle back to something you said earlier. And when you said this to me in our conversation, it really just opened up so much for me in terms of helping women to really own their confidence around sales. Because if we're going to make a difference, we have to know how to get our message out there in a confident and authentic way. And you said sales is not a personality, it's a skill set. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Totally. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So talk more about that. Let's really dive into this concept of no matter how you're wired, but specifically for those of you who can really relate to having more introverted tendencies, let's talk a little bit about how, same as with others you see on Instagram who show up in a different way, you are going to show up a different way in how you sell the things that you are creating. So talk a little bit about how you came to that conclusion about skills being more of a skill or sales being more of a skill set than a personality.
Yeah. And I think we all sort of like, we think of like the salesman sort of back in the day, like, hey,
Suit and
I'm going to
tie.
sell you some cars, we think of like, that's what we think of when we think of a salesman. We think of a used car salesman. We think of, just people who kind of give us that like icky vibe, when we think of sales. And it's like,
Totally.
and as people, we don't like being sold to. If you know that you're being sold to, I think that it immediately just puts a guard up for people, So when I first realized, first of all, like that's not my personality to be like that, like aggressive, forceful person. But when I realized that my personality didn't have anything to do with my ability to sell to people and that sales is actually a skill set, that arguably I think is better for introverts, or like that introverts have an advantage there. My world really began to change. And that starts with a couple things. Starts with first understanding your customer really deeply, like on every level. So I think as introverts, we're people who can recognize emotions in others. We can name those emotions and we can really get to the root, are able to see the root of people's problems.
Yes.
So I think first understand the mindset of your customer. Like, what is happening with your customer? What are their struggles? What's their day-to-day life like? What are they telling themselves when they wake up? What are they telling themselves when they go to sleep? What are their doubts? What are their fears, their pain points? So I think really understanding that is the first thing that's really important. The next thing is to understand how you can solve their problem. So again, what is I keep saying this because this is so important. Like, what is the tangible thing that you can give people in order for them to progress? So I think, and then at the same time, I really realized this when I first sold a package to my first high ticket client, which was thousands of dollars. And I was like, oh my God, somebody paid me, like one person paid me thousands of dollars. Like, this is crazy to me. But I realized that it was because, and again, had so many blocks about that before. We could probably have a whole podcast just about like money beliefs and stuff. But I think it was the fact that I connected so deeply with that person. And a big part of that too is being vulnerable myself. So I think that, again, this is about trust, so I think that if we are vulnerable to the extent that a person is going to see themselves in us, and at the same time being consistent. So consistency is also a trust builder, like showing up consistently on social media. You put this podcast out consistently, showing up when you say you're going to show up. And then I think also knowing a little bit about charisma and likability. So looking your people in the eye when you talk to them. There's 3 parts to charisma that we can talk about, which is presence. So like really when you're talking to somebody, like be fully present in the conversation. Like don't be looking at your phone. Don't be looking all over the place. Just make sure that you are with them and speaking to them from the heart, and show warmth at the same time. And I think even body language is a big thing too. So making sure that you don't have your arms crossed. Make sure that you're leaning in a little bit, not to like a creepy extent, you know what I mean? Not like
personal boundaries.
Personal boundaries, exactly. But I think just like leaning in a little bit, even if you are on live video, this is a good tip. And then I think moving your arms too is another, like so much of this is like into the mind of the consumer. And there's something psychological that happens when we show our hands to people. So like using your hands when you talk, again, in a way that feels natural to you, or wait to do it until it feels natural. But I think that is just an automatic trust thing that allows people to then let their guard down a little bit. And then, building that rapport and building that connection by, again, going back into their mindset, making sure that you know what their desired outcome is, and letting them know that they can get that result from you. And the last thing I'll say, I know there's a lot here, is value, making sure that you can give people a lot of value. So especially online, giving away a lot of value for free on Instagram, tangible things. That way people feel like, oh my God, I got a win from her without me ever paying her. Imagine what it would be like if I paid her. Imagine what it would be like if I worked one-on-one with her. So again, owning that expertise, giving that value consistently, and then sharing your story and vulnerably on top of that, is that whole mix, I think, can be really, really good.
And so what I want everyone to just pause here and really acknowledge is that everything Ashley was just sharing are skills that can be learned.
Yes, exactly.
And especially if you're selling something that you genuinely believe in and are passionate about, then that's the part that can't really be taught. The other stuff can be. So I would love if you would just kind of like tie this conversation up with a bow by talking a little bit about, how do you know if you are selling the right product or service? Do you think that having something you truly believe in with your whole heart and soul is necessary in order for you to be effective at sales?
Well, I think that I think a lot of it has to do with like who's actually there.
Mm,
Like who is your audience? And I think that with what you are selling, I think sometimes it has to be a dance between what you want to talk about and what
yeah.
you want, and then also what they want too. So, if just giving you an example, inserting my story into this, I actually didn't want to talk about cooking at all when I started online because I was like, I've done this for 7 years. I'm like so done with this. I only want to talk about mindset and personal development. And I worked with an amazing business coach who I'm still working with now. I think you know her, Jill Coleman, um, who is amazing. And she taught me that, you also have to listen to what other people want. So I
Yeah.
think don't be afraid to speak to your audience and ask them once a week, hey, what would be most helpful for you? What is your
Mm,
biggest struggle? That way you can take and on the online world, I think the two most popular things that you can give are like recipes and workouts. Like people, people love that. They're savable. Um, but I think having that open, constant conversation with your audience and the people who are actually there,
mhm.
like those are going to be the people that buy from you.
Right.
So you need to make sure that whatever it is you're delivering, that there's people on the other side who are going to buy it and pay you for it. So I think it's that constant dance of, hey, what do I like and what am I an expert in? But how can I mold this in a way so that people are going to actually buy it? And I think that you should actually test your idea first, because imagine if you built this whole course or something and you spent like 6 months doing it and then you go to sell it, even if you know it's amazing, like brilliant ideas, sometimes like, if there's nobody to buy it, then it won't actually be something that can be viable for you, which
Right.
I think is just the truth about business and selling sometimes. So I think keeping that honest, open conversation with your audience, even Rachel Hollis, who is huge now, she's really exploded this year. When she's asked like, hey, what was the thing that like helped your success? She's always like, I just listen to the audience. I always
Yes.
just listen to the needs of the audience. So constantly have that open conversation with them. And then that also makes you like a person who is relatable and on the same level as your consumer, because
Yeah.
relatability is a big factor of trust as well.
Oh, amen to all of that. I love it. We could turn this into like 3 podcasts worth
I
of
know.
content.
I know.
I want to make sure that people get a chance to hear a little bit more about your program, which has the best name ever. It's called Introverts That Convert. So, talk to us a little bit about what that program entails, what someone can expect to get out of it, and of course, like where they can find it.
Yes. So again, this was something that actually developed through the needs of my audience. I actually never imagined that I would be teaching about business. I was like the food girl, the food and nutrition person, and it was actually the needs of my audience that told me, hey, help me do this. So
Yeah.
I've spent the last year and a half working with people one on one with business, but I saw that there was a need for people who were maybe just starting and
Mm,
maybe didn't have the funds to invest in high level one-on-one coaching package. So I
sure.
wanted to offer people something that wouldn't include direct access to me one-on-one, but it would give a community for them to come together. So Introverts That Convert is going to be a 6-month mentorship program. And each month we're going to have a theme. So I'm going to be teaching you about sales, marketing, market research, how to build your offer, how to build courses. It's mainly for digital business, and everything that's involved with that, how to build an email list. And I'm helping women, pretty much take their expertise and then turn it into a viable business that will allow them the freedom to pretty much live the life that they want to. And we're going to have 2 monthly calls with me. So it's both the community aspect, a little bit of access to me, and then the curriculum. And I'm super excited for
It's
it.
so brilliant.
Thank you.
I'm obsessed with it and so grateful that you created it
Oh,
because
thank you.
I do believe that the mindset, everything we really set the conversation up with in the beginning gets in the way for a lot of women that I know to share their gifts. And I
Yes.
believe that the world will work better the more women and men, but women is mainly our community, that the more we get into action around the things that we feel uniquely called to create.
Yeah. And we really like, I can't say it enough, what a time to be alive. Like with the power of everything,
Yeah.
like 50 years ago, we wouldn't be able to reach the amount of people that we do. And really, I think like so many people feel alone, especially if you're on a journey of business or if you're somebody who is just getting into personal development. You feel so like you're officially the weirdo in like your friend
Yep.
group and in your families, even sometimes like for you wanting to get better. It's so odd to me that it happens like that. I mean, I understand it, but I think just having the power for women to know that there's a community out there. So many of the people
Mm.
that I'm good friends with now who are sort of doing the things that same things that I'm doing in business, I met on the internet
Yep.
or through a mastermind group like you and I met, you know?
Same.
And it's just really about like how beautiful to take what it is that's your gift and the way
Mhm.
that you can serve and help women and then make that into your career. And I truly believe like entrepreneurship isn't for everybody, but for those who have it in their heart, if you just stay consistent and you keep going, I mean, I wanted to give up a lot like throughout the years, but as long as you stay consistent and you trust in your path and you share vulnerably, really amazing things can happen.
Oh, I love that so much. And I want to make sure people know where they can find you, where they can find more information about introverts that convert, and also your amazing online cooking school, which we didn't get into, but
I
where
know.
can we find out about all of the above?
So if you follow me on Instagram at Ashley K Pardo, I have all of the links there in my bio that you'll be able to view everything. You can get on the wait list for introverts that convert. I'm actually going to be having a free training, a week-long training in January. So if you wanted to just get a taste about this for free, be on the lookout for that just by following me on Instagram. And then my cooking school is called Quickfire Kitchen, which is a cooking school that teaches you about methods in the kitchen. We use recipes a little bit, but my goal is to teach people how to use techniques and methods so that they can literally feel that they can make thousands of dishes and have confidence in the kitchen by with using like really, really practical tips. And again, you can find that all on Instagram at Ashley K Pardo.
And there's an amazing free guide that I just downloaded that you offer
Oh, yes.
after you did this amazing demonstration at the retreat weekend we were both at. And my world was rocked when you showed us that different way to dice an onion. Like
Yes.
life changed.
And it's
So
so simple.
so
It's so
simple.
simple. And now when you dice an onion, like you'll probably think of it,
I think
you
of
know?
you every time.
Yeah, and that's the thing, those little wins, that's just a great
Mhm.
example in business. And thank you for downloading that guide. That's like just a free cooking guide. I can give that to you guys too, just a link that you can sign up to get that. But yeah, thank you I've had so much fun. This has
Oh,
been awesome.
goodness. I know. I wish that we got to do this every single day,
I
but I'm
know.
so grateful for the time that you took just to hang out with us and just really share your heart. We always end with this question, and you really so beautifully spoke into this already at so many points throughout the interview. But if we were just to wrap it up into if you had one message to impart to women who are listening to this that just need that little dose of encouragement to take the next step on their journey, whatever it might be, to create a business, a passion project, start sharing their gifts, what would you want women to know based on your story and your journey?
So I would say, I think that when we go on a path like this, it's going to be uncomfortable. So, and as introverts, like it's easy for us to feel uncomfortable, but the more that and my discomfort held me back for years, my discomfort, my fear, because I thought like, oh, the moment I feel like it, that's when I'll do it.
Yes.
Not going to feel scared. We could have a whole podcast about fear. But the moment that I don't feel the fear anymore is when I'm going to get started. But then I realized that that fear is always going to be there. Like even as you grow, the bigger the levels, the bigger the devils, you know? So the degree to which you get uncomfortable is going to be the degree to which you grow. So I would say if you're feeling uncomfortable, that's a good sign. Push through it. That's how you're going to grow. And at the same time, just be consistent every day. Like this can take a long time. Sometimes, it's taken me several years to get to the place that I am today. But I know that I wouldn't have gotten here if I hadn't started, 5 years ago. So
Right.
just stay consistent every single day. keep the faith, believe in yourself. Truly, the people that are successful are the people that don't give up. So just keep going.
Amen.
Yes.
Ashley, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Lindsay. Thank you so much.